So here's a particular book summary that the name is Finish What You Start. Okay, the art of following here through taking action, execution and self-discipline by Peter Hollins, right? So here, long form summary, what I have, Finish What You Start by Peter Hollins, right? So I will start from the introduction, right? The crucial skill of following through. Okay, in Finish What You Start, Peter Hollins explores one of the most underestimated, essential traits for personal and professional success, right? The ability here, to follow through. While many people here are driven by ideas and initial enthusiasm, very few poses here, the discipline mindset here required, to carry tasks and completions. Hollins, argue the consistent ability to finish what you actually begins, is not matter of talent or luck, right? But cultivating skills, anchors in self-discipline here, deliberate action and psychological awareness, right? So I will start from the chapter 1 that the psychological begins incompletion, right? The author begins by dissecting the common psychological barriers, right, that prevents people from completing tasks. He explores completion bias, right, even fear of success and the discomfort of uncertainty. Hollins introduced the Jaganic effects and psychological phenomenon, where the incomplete task remains in our mind, right, so causing stress and mental distraction here. However, instead of using this as motivation, many individuals here avoid finishing the escapes of discomfortness, right? So understanding these inner dynamic to key the overcoming them, right? Chapter 2 is here intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So Hollins drew a clear distinction, between intrinsic that we call internal, right, and extrinsic that we call external motivation, right? So here, while external motivators such as their deadline, rewards or peer pressure here can be effective in the short terms here, they often fails the sustained long term commitment, true and lasting here follow through. He explains comes from within here. Identifying your personal why behind a task provides clarity, purpose, and emotional connection here, which fuels, persistent effort, even in the absence of immediate result, right? So chapter 3 is here, building the strengthening self-discipline here. So self-discipline, according to Hollins here, is the foundation, pillar of successful execution, right? It is not an innate trait, but a skill that can develop through consistent practice. He present self-discipline and a decision-making framework, choosing what is most important over what is most comfortable and pleasurable, right, in the moment, right? Strategies such as their environment, design, habit, information, and mental conditioning, are presented as tools to strengthen willpower and resist impulsive behavior, right? So chapter 4 is planning and precision and clarity, right? So vague goals often lead to vague outcomes. Hollins here emphasizes the importance of clarity and specifically here in planning. So here encourages breaking down large abstracts goals into actionable manageable here steps, creating systems rather than here relying on willpower alone here helps automate progress. The author also highlights the importance of prioritization, suggesting here techniques like Eisenhower matrix, time blocking, and structured daily focus, right? So chapter 5 is eliminating distractions and managing energy, right? So finishing tasks is not only about time management and also about energy management, right? Hollins discusses how distraction, especially digital ones here, erode concentration and momentum. He recommends setting boundaries, right, using focus tools like here Pomodoro technique, and optimizing your work here environment to reduce the cognitive fatigue, right? So additional addresses the value of sleep, and nutrition and physical health in maintaining the energy needed to consistently execution, right? So chapter 6 is developing mental toughness and grit, right? So to follow through the under pressure, individual must develop mental resilience. Hollins drew from the research of psychologists like Angela Duckworth, right, to emphasize the role of grit. Okay, a combination of passion and perseverance here. He encourages readers to embrace, discuss, take ownership here, the failures, and push through the emotional resistance Building no excuses here mindset allows individual to maintain commitment even when motivation one wins. Okay, so chapter 7 here, execution is a daily habit, not a one-time act. So execution is not a single act but a daily practice. Hollins encourages here readers to build routines, that rituals that align with the priorities, right? He introduces the concept of pre-commitment where individuals here take steps in advance to ensure here success. These include here accountability system, visuals, reminders, and behaviors triggers consistently over intensity is the theme. Small repeated action build momentum and compound results over time. So becoming a finisher here, the next point is, so a closing Peter Hollins here reiterates that the ability to finish what you start is a learnable and a trainable skill, right? It requires clarity, focus, and internal motivation, self-discipline, and resilience. By understanding the psychological forces at play and here applying practical tools, anyone can transform themselves from a habitual here procrastinator, right? Procrastinator into a consistent achiever, right? So the real difference between the success and stagnation is not how often you start, it's actually reliable, it's how reliably you finish. So absolutely, so that's the point about a fact of it, right, which is so essential in our life. So if I'm actually go through with the point here, that psychology of incompletion, right? So I will firstly break down the chapters into a different phase. So 1 to 10, there is a point here that Peter Hollins begins addressing here common struggles, right? The inability to follow through here. The most people don't fail at starting, they fail here they fail at finishing. So the reason here Hollins explains lies in psychological resistance, including fear of failure, right? Okay, perfectionism, fear of success here, and uncertainty. Okay, uncertainty. Okay, so here as we know about the fact that life is totally uncertain, right? So in that particular point here, that the psychology here lies in psychological resistance, including fear of failure and perfectionism, right? Fear of success here and uncertainty, right? Okay, so these internal blocks here cause people to abandon tasks halfway. He introduces the Jaeger-Nick effects, a psychological principle starting here, that incomplete task creating here mental tension, ironically, rather than using this pressure as a fuel to complete a task here. People often avoid it, hoping the tension will go away. Unfortunately, the avoidance lead to stress here, low esteem, and unfulfilled potential. Understanding the emotional and cognitive bias that block progress is the first step towards overcoming them. The science and importance of finishing. In section here, Hollins explores here why the act finishing, the critical to personal identity and confidence, right? So completion leads to a sense of control here, integrity, and satisfaction. People who habitually finish what they actually start build, momentum and develop what Hollins called finisher's identity. Each small success reinforces your ability to trust yourself, by every abandoned goal erodes that trust. He explains that execution and follow through the learnable behaviors, not personality traits. Finishing is a skill that compounds much like interest over time. So the more you do it, the more natural becomes. It is less about motivation and more about building the identity of doer, right? So motivation here, internal and external, right? So motivation is commonly understood here, and Hollins debunks the myth here that willpower or discipline is enough on its own, right? Instead of differentiation between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, here the external motivators like rewards, recognitions or pressure from others may spark initial action but rarely sustain it. True follow through here depends on intrinsic motivation, the personal emotion here, reasons behind your actions. Hollins urges readers to define here why with clarity. Why does the goal matter? So what deeper purpose deep it serve, motivation rooted it identity, value, and personal growth leads to sustainable, meaningful action, right? So here the skill of self-discipline, The skill of self-discipline here. Self-discipline is the core of finishing what you start. Hollins here reframes discipline not as denial but the strategic decisions making, choosing long-term reward over short-term comfortness, right? So it is a skill that can gained through a repetition here, environmental design and deliberate habits, right? So he introduces practical methods such as the 40% borrowed from the Navy SEALs. Like the 40% here, when you think you are done, you have only used 40% of capacity, right? So in implementation here, intentions, setting clear, if X happens, I will do Y plans, right? So here delay tactics, giving yourself permission to decay, temptation for 10 to 15 minutes, often awakening in the argue, right? So the discipline is not about being rigid; it's about being intentional. So intentional planning and structure here. Hollins, emphasizes the importance of strategic planning. One major here reason people don't finish is because their goals are vague or overwhelming. Here a goal like write a book is too abstract. It needs to broken into a measurable action, right? So here he suggests that breaking goals into micro steps to reduce overwhelm, using time blocking here to schedule tasks and protect your time, right? So applying here as an hover matrix to distant use here, urgent versus important task, right? So keeping a daily highlights one key task per day that moves the needle, right? Clarity breeds your confidence. The more specific your plan, the easy is to follow through. Distraction management and focuses, right? So here execution thrives the environments of focus. Here Hollins identifies modern distraction, especially digital ones, as key obstacles to finish. Phones, social media, multitasking are major drain on incognitive energy, right? To counteract this, he recommends creating distraction free zone or time window, using tools like Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes focus sprints and 5 minutes of rest, right? This is called the Pomodoro technique. Turning off notification and setting do not disturb time blocks, right? So prioritizing here energy management over time management, working when your energy is highest, right? Finish is not about just doing more, but about creating the spark to think, act and execute deeply. Next point is emotional and control grit. Following through becomes difficult when emotions, boredom, here frustration, self-doubt, interfere. Hollins asserts here, that emotional regulation is a critical aspect of execution. Great resilience and mental stamina help here, bridge the gap between starting and finishing, right? So he actually encourages readers to accept discomfort as part of the process, right? Accept discomfort as a part of process, right? So understand the boredom is not a single to quit, but a test to overcome. Use visualization technique to stay emotional connected and to the goal, right? Okay. Build the emotional habits like journaling and mindfulness to stay grounded. Developing grit means here committing to the process even when results are invisible or slow. Execution as a daily mindset. Finishing is not a single act, it's a daily philosophy. Hollins introduces the ideas of pre-commitment, where you design your environment, your schedule to make success easier, right, and failure harder. For example, laying out workout clothes the night before increases the follow through. So here the key tools included here, the routine and rituals that cue productivity. Behavior triggers the initial habits, like example here sitting at a clean desk equals to start writing, right? So accountability systems here, having someone who expects update from you. He emphasizes that consistency, not intensity, is what creates lasting transformation. Next point is overcoming here perfectionism and procrastination, right? Here perfectionism is one of the biggest enemies of progress. Here Hollins defines it is a form of procrastination, a fear-based strategy to avoid failure or judgment. Many delay finishing because they want things to be flawless, but in reality this only stalls growth. he advises, adopting a bias towards action done better than perfection, right? Perfect. Focusing here on iteration, start finishing, then improve later. Viewing here mistakes as a part of the learning, curve rather than proof or inadequacy, right? So breaking the perfectionism loop, liberate your execute with confidence and flexibility. So the next point is the role of identity and self-talk. Ultimately, Hollins argues, that finishing what you start is reflection, of your identity, right? Okay, it's a reflection of your identity. If you see yourself as door, a closer or someone who follow through, your action will be aligned, with that belief, So conversely, if you identify as a procrastinator or start without finisher, your behavior will reinforce that identity, right? So he argues readers to that reframe self-talk, replace I can't or I am not motivated with I choose to and I will, right? Celebrated small wins to reinforce the belief in your capabilities, guys, right? So surround yourself with people who also value discipline and execution, who actually don't have the discipline and executional power, right? Who actually don't giving the actual time for it, for their work, for their actually work ethics. If they don't stay around with them, right? Because that's not worth it, and you will actually lose your important time what you want actually in your life. So in your subconscious mindset, you have to set like this, right? So you become what you repeatedly do and what you repeatedly say to yourself. So the conclusion of the point is becoming the kind of person who finishes. So Peter Hollins closes the book here with a powerful reminders. Executions is not about being gifted. It's about here being intentional. By understanding your psychology, mastering self-discipline, planning effectively, right, and managing emotions, you can transform from someone who abandons goals into someone who finishes consistently. In a world full of distraction, instant here gratification and endless to-do list, the real ability here to finish what you start is a competitive edge and a gateway to real personal growth, right? So here, this is all about the book of Finish What You Start, right? The art of following through, taking action, execution, and self-reflection by Peter Hollins. So yeah.